Okay, we're all set to go. This is the July 14, 2021 special meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mayor Rilling. Mr. Abrams.
Present.
Ms. Brown. Chairman Camacho.
Here.
Mr. Frere.
Here.
Mr. Jelleret.
Here.
Mr. Casimis.
Here.
5 present, you have a quorum.
Okay. So jumping right into this, we have the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the June 7, 2021 regular meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved, this Troy.
Okay, Troy moves the item. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, are there any additions, corrections, deletions at this point?
Yeah, I had, Mr. Chairman, I had one. In the last paragraph, it said Mr. Frere expressed concerns that the controls, it should be internal controls, and were not very effective, and other control systems may not be working.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Yeah, a couple of quick typos on page 2, second to last paragraph, starting with my name. The last sentence should say, it says "thus said," it should say "that said." Mr. Jelleret's point was well taken. And then on page 2. Okay. That's the only thing I have at this point.
Okay. Is there anything else? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
I'm sorry, did someone abstain? Yes, I think Artie abstained.
Yeah, I was not at the meeting.
Okay, so with one abstention, that being Artie, the motion carries and the minutes are approved as amended. Next item on the agenda, there's no special appropriations item on the agenda. There is a transfer. There are a couple of transfer items on the agenda, and I believe we're going to do the Community Services Department first, I believe, because Lamont needs to be at another meeting. So we can begin with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, board members. So I have before you today requesting transfer, and you have the supporting documents. For over 20 years, the Senior Services umbrella was the municipal agent for the elderly. The municipal agent for the elderly is a state statute where it asks or requests or kind of mandates cities and municipalities to provide support services to seniors, specifically our most vulnerable. So we're talking about seniors who are eligible for many of the entitlement programs, and also seniors who definitely take advantage of the senior tax credits. And so for many, many years, and some of you may remember Laura Epstein, unfortunately, she passed away, and she was definitely a true champion for senior services throughout the city for over many decades. And so in consultation with the Senior Services umbrella, which was the organization that she founded, and the board, prior to COVID, we were in conversation around the dissolvement of that board. And so that put us in a position on the city side to go out to bid once again and to look for a new municipal agent for the elderly. And so as we open up and my department starts kind of getting back into the swing of things, we're picking up many of the items that have put us in delay because of COVID. And one of those areas is the new municipal agent for the elderly. So since then, we have done our competitive bidding process, and the Family, Children, and Agency Aid was awarded the contract on behalf of the city to provide those services for, again, our most vulnerable seniors. The funding for this was always administered through the health department historically, and has been that way for decades. And so, as you know, with the new structure in my department forming, I continue to look at the funding from a community service perspective, what makes sense for my department to really oversee. And then, as I have I shared with you on many other times, creating some new accountability measures and just doing our due diligence that as we fund and continue to support the great work our nonprofits is doing, putting under my department and the team that I supervise to ensure that those services are being done adequately, and also reporting mechanisms. So I have before you that funding, which is the same amount that has been funded in the health department, to transfer that funding into the community services department, because effective as of July 1, we have awarded Family Children's Agency as the municipal agent, like a tongue twister, municipal agent for the elderly.
I have a question, Lamont. I'm a little confused by this. You indicate that you're asking for money to be transferred from the health department to community services department, but this money is coming out of contingency, is it not?
I think I can answer that question. I reached out to the health department, and there was a disconnect during the budget process. The money should have been, so Deanna Diamore, the director of the health department, she knew that this money was going to move to Lamont's budget, but it didn't get added to Lamont's budget. So to correct that, we're taking it out of contingency because it wasn't budgeted anywhere, essentially.
Okay, but it's traditionally budgeted year in, year out, except that
Yes.
this year there was a
Yes, sir.
misunderstanding as to
Yes.
whose budget that would go into?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. So it was there in the prior year budget and not budgeted in the current year.
And do you know what was in there for the prior, what the amount was previously? Is this amount more or less in line with what we previously budgeted?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Lamont.
Well, yes, it's the exact same amount.
As the year before?
Yes, sir, which will allow us to cover the new municipal agent for the city.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Lamont, is this amount going to cover the whole is that exactly the contract that we're giving to the Family Children's Agency?
That's a great question. No, so I'm asking to transfer what Dan had in her budget. I had budgeted some funding, and to Andrew's point, it just got disconnected and lost to move that money with my additional. The actual full amount will be $150,000, and I have the $30,000 already budgeted in community services to support the work that Family Children Agency will now be doing on behalf of the city for seniors.
So the contract to Family Children's Agency is 150.
That is correct.
Okay. Just curious, Family Children's Agency going to be doing the work of the agency for elderly?
Well, they'll provide specific services, and this is around this helping our seniors with entitlements, helping the most vulnerable, helping our seniors with benefit programs and Medicaid. I can say, which I'm really excited, that for those that may know, Tanya, who was the municipal agent under Laura Epstein's leadership, they hired her. So what was important to the city is that the work continues. There's no gap in services. Tanya's been in that position for over 20 years. And I'll be very frank, what I was really looking to do is professionalize the services that that Family Children's Agency is able to do with new reporting mechanisms and accountability measures, so that we can ensure that the services continue to go forward and know that it's in the services in the right place, because of the dissolvement for senior services umbrella that Laura Epstein led for many decades.
Does Family Children's Agency have any other contracts for elderly in any other municipalities?
No, Family Children's Aid is a Norwalk agency. They provide a whole breadth of services. They also provide senior home care, senior support services. So this was just a perfect fit in the work that they're doing. You hear the word Family Children's Agency, but they have a strong senior component. It's just not in the name of the organization.
Okay.
Great question.
So are they, so this is going to be an expansion of the Family Children's Agency. Is it going to be then named?
Well, I think the elderly falls under family probably rather than children.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I hear what
Just
you're saying. The
leave the
name
children's
itself.
off then.
Yeah, I mean, that's the name of the organization, but they have a strong senior arm of the work they're doing. The name could be misleading in the sense that, why are we funding, or why are we supporting a family children's agency? But through the competitive process and through our panel that was involved in the process, they most definitely were the strongest candidate and provide the services and have a track record of already engaging and working with seniors on a variety of support services already.
So this is
happening in
more or
our
less
city.
just an expansion of the Family Children's Agency to include more programs for elderly.
Yes, sort of, but the municipal agent specifically is really around our most vulnerable, which I mean our low income seniors. So while
Yeah,
all senior programs can say we provide all services, but the state statute asks municipalities to
Yeah.
really narrow in for our low income family or low income seniors. So we really carved out, this contract was specific to carve out that while you provide your services for all seniors, the state has mandated make sure we're targeting our low income because they're the most vulnerable and often are the most challenged with getting services and understanding how to support themselves.
So Lamont, I hate to keep bugging you on this, but you keep referring to the contract, and that's what led me to believe that you were awarding a contract to another agency.
That is correct. Just like Senior Services Umbrella had a contract with the city to be the municipal agent for the elderly for many decades.
And the monies
So
were
the-
administered through the health department.
Right, but under, I forget the former health director before Deanna, that was the arrangement prior to both our arrivals here in the city of Norwalk.
So the Family Children's Agency is a separate agency that has a contract with the city?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
I'm sorry if I was confusing.
No, I was confused that it just, you talked about contract and then you said, well, we're already using Family Children's Agency. It's part of your group and I didn't think there was a contractual arrangement with them. So, okay, fine, I understand it.
Great, thanks.
Lamont, this is Troy. Quick question. How many people applied for the RFP? Just curious, how many that was awarded to FCA?
Sure, 3.
Three applicants, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the other question, I guess, Angela, is that available balance correct? That 552, shouldn't that be a little higher or?
Right, yeah, that 552 was an error left from a previous spreadsheet. So the 1.5 million is the available budget.
Okay, and then that balance below the 1,343,000 is after these two items.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Is there anything else? Any
No.
other question?
Mr. Chairman, do we have to move this item?
Yeah, we do have to move it. I apologize. We had discussion before the item was moved. Would you mind moving it, Ed, and we'll
So moved.
take a vote. It's been moved by Ed. Discussion has been had. All in favor of approving the transfer item, the transfer amount of 30, what's the amount? It's, I'm sorry, 121,748.
Yes, sir.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item carries. The transfer is approved. Thank you, Lamont.
Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me speak first. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Have a good night.
I'm having audio and video problems. I'm raising my hand.
Oh, hi, Sherry. Are you back? Are you, can you hear us now? You're on
I'm
mute.
actually trying, because I don't know why I'm having such a problem today. I'm trying to actually call in while I still have this up. So
Okay. Were you part of that last vote? I don't, I'm not sure if
Yes,
Don was part of
yes.
that. Okay, so,
yes,
okay. So Sherry was here and she voted in the affirmative. Next item on the agenda is the fire department transfer item of 34,567 for variable message signage or signs that have, I guess the ones we have are at the end of their useful life, and this amount is theoretically reimbursable. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, sir. From the COVID-19 disaster declaration, it is a reimbursable item. And I have Michelle DeLuca's also on the call tonight from Emergency Management. She could explain all the FEMA requirements, but it is reimbursable. So that's why we decided we should go forward and replace these while we can.
Could you explain to us a little bit? I think it's pretty, is this one of those big signs that are electronic that have changed?
Yeah, those big, they're orange, typically orange. They're pulled on a trailer and they're disconnected and left on the side of the road or in a parking lot, wherever you need to send a pretty large message to either the public or, an event, at an event situation. So we've had these for 10 years now. And they've been lent out to all the other agencies. When Newark Hospital started their COVID-19 testing, we had these two signs in operation 24 hours a day for months. And they're finally, at the end of their life, they were tried to be repaired. They weren't repaired, couldn't be repaired. And here we are. We're trying to get them now.
Okay, so before we go into the reimbursement aspect of it, I have not moved this, or no one has moved. We have not moved this item. So if someone would move the item and we can continue with our discussion.
Move it.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved by Artie and Jim. All right, and I'm sorry, who was here to talk to us about the reimbursement stuff?
Michelle DeLuca.
Hi, good evening.
Hi there.
Yeah, so again, as the chief mentioned, we've had the VMS for probably about 10, a little bit more years. Originally, these were the only two that we had in the city, and they were purchased as part of a regional Homeland Security program. So again, the region, using Homeland Security funds, bought these for the city. And again, we've been using them extensively. We know that, again, there's a very limited window where we can actually put these through under the FEMA COVID cost, which is why, again, we're trying to get them purchased now so they could be reimbursed. And again, they're supposed to be able to be reimbursed at 100%.
Okay, and what's the window again for the reimbursement, for the purchase of the reimbursement?
We don't know exactly when the governor is going to end all the emergency declarations. Typically with any kind of disaster, once the emergency declarations are closed, that usually begins a process of closing out eligible expenses. So again, now that we're kind of at the tail end of COVID, I know there's been a lot of discussion about ending his emergency powers. So again, we're just trying to get it in before, while we can, so we're not, again, really pushing it at the last minute.
Okay. Any other
Michelle,
questions?
Michelle, this is Jim Frater, your old neighbor, actually.
Hello, how are you? I thought I recognized you.
Good. So a couple of quick questions. How many of these do we have? Is it just two?
The R2, which I refer to as the dinosaurs, or the originals, the police department was able to get one through, again, COVID. They had a special allotment of money that they're able to use. And then Parks and Public Works, I think, have 3 or 4 between them. Typically, when we've had some events, again, COVID especially, we've had all the variable message signs deployed at once. And then we also know that with Public Works, some of the projects that they have, whether it's bridge repairs, those really, again, need to be set aside for Public Works projects. The Parks and Rec one is at the beach pretty much through the summer. So again, like we've tried as much as possible with our VMS to really try to do seasonal safety messages. And then should we have a storm or other event, use our VMS for, again, some of those safety related ideas. But the 3 agencies, Public Works, Fire, and Police Department, we all do coordinate the deployment of signs. But again, like we've had the 2 for so many years, they really are valuable assets to us.
Is it, So you share all these among the three departments. And obviously you would probably have to have, in case of an emergency, you'd always have to have one available. So it might be difficult to borrow it from one of the other departments.
Correct. And again, especially we know once again, now that we're kind of moving beyond COVID, a lot of again, whether it's public works repairs and some of their other projects, their signs typically get deployed long-term. So again, we really try not to pull those because a lot of those are traffic related. So we don't want to, again, start moving their DPW signs. And then again, we do try to coordinate, but I always like to have them available. And then also, again, we know some towns, if they have an emergency, might also need to borrow them.
So is there any justification possibly in getting more of these since we're going to be reimbursed? How old are some of the other ones that the other departments have? Are they on their last legs as well? I mean, it would occur to me that if we're going to get reimbursed for these two machines, why not buy a couple more and make sure that we're going to have an adequate supply should emergencies crop up?
I would love that. Again, we were just, again, I will never say no. Yeah, we were just trying to replace the dinosaurs that have died. But again, we were just trying to be respectful and kind of mindful of the funding. But again, if we were able to get a third or a fourth, that would be great. Public Works, Parks, and Police Department, those are actually newer. So police, theirs is probably about a year old. Public Works and Parks, theirs are probably about two to 3 years. They got them in smaller groupings, but theirs are relatively new, so they do have a good amount of life left in them.
Chief, do you see any benefit in getting more than two?
Well, it seems like there's always a need to have information put out throughout the city. So we certainly have the room to store them in our apparatus garage if you wanted to do that. But again, like Michelle said, we were just trying to replace what we have, and we could certainly, if we had more, we would use them, that's for sure.
And wouldn't we have to justify the need for more than two by your department, let's say, for purposes of reimbursement, or is the reimbursement made willy-nilly? Yeah, you can buy 10 of them and that's fine.
I think, no.
Yeah, I think, and we've always been very conservative with costs. And again, I'll kind of defer to Angela as far as like what's been reimbursed to date. I think, again, I on my end with FEMA, I'm always, again, kind of ultra conservative when it comes to what we spend and get back. Angela, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I just asked the question just because we
Yeah.
have to be mindful that we might not get reimbursed if we buy more than we need, arguably, simply because they're free, kind of.
Right.
But with
My experience with FEMA has been, unless you're really egregious, like there are certain things that they are red flags for them, like disproportionate expenditures. You had a loss of 50,000, you're asking for 300,000. So my experience has been very positive with them. If you work within their guidelines and you don't make egregious errors, I think it's likely that you'll get reimbursement.
Yeah, I'm not saying, I think it's crazy to ask for 10. I think you were just being facetious. But
I was just to make the point, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe 3. Is 3 a better number than 2? Obviously.
But do we have any data as a board to know how many signs are in use at any one time that would justify the need for more? I mean, we say anecdotally we can always use more, but do we have any information on how many of our 7 signs, I think the total is now, are in use in one time?
Currently, again, we have, now that the testing at Vets Park and North Community College has ended, those 2 have been brought back in. Those had been deployed for as long as the Community Health Center had been doing testing at Vets Park, again, and NCC. Again, we did have one at the beach since January for the food distribution. So for the most part, and again, not knowing all the, again, if some of the others are being used for DPW like road projects, I would say probably about 5 could be deployed at any one time. And again, our 2 are just dead. But again, for the most part, once we have them, we are always getting, again, requests. So again, we are very mindful not to, again, give them to like nonprofits, just for lease. But again, we use them for the Oyster Festival because there is a safety component. So again, we know that when the Oyster Festival is on, we'll probably have 3, possibly 4 of those signs deployed. I'm trying to think.
Ed,
Sorry?
Chairman Ed?
Yes.
I know the governor's powers were extended to September 9th today.
Yes.
So if we still have a 2-month window, maybe the chief can come back next month and let us know, to get an assessment of, do we really need more or not, and see, and get a better number.
Yeah, but I think the chief, the department wants, I think that's a good idea, but I think you want action on these 2 just because we don't know.
I agree. I agree when action on these 2, but Jim's suggestion to get more is, let's see if we really need them.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's fair.
And if I could just add, for what it's worth, there is a little bit of benefit in buying as a group. So again, the price does come down, I believe, if you buy 3 or 4. That's what Public Works, when they put their order in, they specifically included the parks, VMS, and the police department. So they were able to get a little bit more of a price break.
Let me ask 2 additional questions. One is, does the fire commission need to approve these purchases, number 1? And number 2, is the reimbursement going to come back to the city, or is it going to come back to the department? Because this is coming out of contingency.
I would think that would go back to the city, but Angela would.
Yeah, it would fall to the bottom line. So it wouldn't go to the department. It would just offset all expenditures.
Got you. And what about the fire commission? Would the fire commission have to weigh in on this in any way?
Since the last, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't think so, but go ahead. Sorry, Gino.
Well, the last ones were bought by the state, so it was just a regional asset that we were managing. I mean, they'll be obviously brought up at the meeting, but I don't believe that they need to vote on it.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. The item was moved. All in favor of approving this transfer of $34,567 from contingency to purchase this machinery, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I guess that's unanimous. I don't see a Sherry on here, but on my screen, but I assume that she's voting in the affirmative. Is that correct, Sherry? All right, she may not be on. So anyway, it's been approved, and we'll get Sherry's input at some point. And that takes care of that item. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you, you too.
Good night now.
Thank you. Next item is the Oak Hills financial report. I believe Mike DePalma is on to give us that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, Mark passed that along to you guys, right? So you have it?
Yeah, we do have it. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, last year was a banner year. So going into this year, we're going to come in, we've got about $400,000 cash on hand right now, with potentially about $500,000 at the end of the month. Obviously last week hurt us, but it really was just kind of a little blip. When you look at what we're projecting for next year, we are acknowledging that a lot of stars aligned for us last year. So we're expecting fewer rounds, but not too much, about 5.5% fewer rounds going into next year. The CapEx piece right now, we show that there is we have a surplus from the previous fiscal year. That's only because the construction on the restaurant has been stalled due to some supply chain issues. So that just means we're going to be it's paying it in this fiscal year as opposed to last fiscal year. But a few of the things, and actually to note about, what we're trying to do now that we do have some cash on hand, is we've been talking for years about doing a continuous golf cart path. Because when we get these heavy rains, we can't put out the carts, which is loss of revenue. We saw that in the last weekend. Even when people wanted to play golf, we wouldn't allow them to go use carts. So we're getting bids on that right now. And we think the payback on that can be relatively quick. Within a couple of seasons, we'll actually see that pay back. And then the other thing we're potentially looking into is putting some golf simulators in. We're getting some quotes on that. I know Paul, the pro, is really keen on it. I think it's a good idea too, to get people down there year round, and plus just to play, get some swings in ahead of rounds and all that. So those are a couple of things we're looking at, but financially very stable right now. Things are going very smooth. So knock on wood, we're in a good place right now. So any questions, fire away.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Mike, this is Troy Jelleret. How are you? A couple of questions. Once again, congratulations, and you just were named the chairman of the authority.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, tomorrow will be my first official meeting. So butterflies.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned the delays. I know I'm there a lot, and I'm noticing that there were a number of dates put out there, and the latest date I heard was August 1st. I mean, what were the problems with the?
Right now, I mean, the restaurant is ready to be open. The only thing is the refrigerators, the walk-in refrigerators. All three of them, we found out in the spring, were out of commission. We found out actually as we started to do some of this work. So BTU is the company that we're contracted with, just with supply issues. I know that we cut them their first check yesterday for the first half of the work, but without the refrigerators, we can't get a building permit to even open. But the structure, everything is ready to go. Everything, plumbing, electrical, everything is ready, we're just waiting on that. So it's unfortunate because obviously we're missing out on revenue because our revenue is tied to the overall revenue, the gross revenue of the restaurant. But it's, Don, our GM, is doing his best down there. It's just, it's kind of out of our hands.
So what is the date that you said you think you will be opening?
The goal is prior to August 1st. I've just been burned by going by, okay, we were going to have it by mid-June, and then it was going to be July 4th. So I would say August 1st, optimistically before that. Only, we're at the will of BTU right now.
Okay, good luck.
Yeah,
couple other things. I noticed on your budget, you budgeted for the revenue for the restaurant next year at 60,000. Is that a number that's going to be capped next year? I think this year there was a cap on that amount, right?
Yeah, it was just on this year. It won't be capped moving forward. No. And to that end, we are still getting revenues from the halfway house. So it's kind of a figuring out what this is going to look like. So far, the halfway house, and it's only been open about 2 months, has generated about $50,000 in revenue. That's just the halfway house. So if you start to now look at what that's going to do in terms of us getting 10% gross, and that's without the restaurant, I think that the $60,000 number is relatively conservative, to be honest. I think moving forward, we wanted this as a test run, this is a new model, which is good. And I actually really like the idea, this came from the city, of 50 cents on every dollar that we get through those revenues has to go into a rainy day fund. So when we look at, we just lost out on a month of revenue. It's really a half of that because the rest of it's going into there. So I think it puts us in a good situation so that hopefully we're not in that situation we were in the spring of last year, that we at least have some cash reserve somewhere.
Good. And then since you're in a great cash position, it looks like you'll end the year with a good cash position. Did you budget in for unlimited players next year? Because I know you have that plan this year. Unlimited, one fee for an unlimited golf.
So it's something we're going to look into again. What Mark, our controller, is doing is figuring out where that break-even point is. So we're tweaking it. We did it the first year because we hadn't done it, we wouldn't have opened the course, and then we looked at it this year and said we want to be in the same spot. If anything, we're going to reduce it, to be honest. It won't be more. You're talking about the season passes, correct? It definitely won't go up. If anything, it might come down. I think we kept it at 75. The only issue is if we've got people that had it last year, do we pull that from them? But well, the real looking into it is where that break-even point is, if it does make sense, because we don't get any revenue over the winter. So that influx of cash is really important to get that over the off season. But that's something that we're going to be looking into, what that break point is and what the cost is going to be. Because to be honest, early on, we didn't really have a base point as to what to charge for that.
And then my last question on the simulators, where will that be? I'm just curious, this golf simulators you mentioned?
Yeah, the old starter building was where they were thinking about putting them. So I don't know how many we'll get in there. It was pretty kind of preliminary. I know Paul was just trying to get some quotes, but that's where we were looking.
Okay, good luck.
All right, thank you.
A couple questions. Could you refresh my memory, at least, on how the city is being paid or repaid the loan or the loans that the authority has received over the years?
Yeah, it's based on rounds. So I believe it's $2 per round that we pay back. So because there's some questions about the restaurant revenue, it's just based on the rounds themselves. So I believe it's $2 per round. I think we paid down $80,000 last year, 85,000. We'll project to do better this year.
So if someone purchases a yearly ticket, let's say a yearly membership, whatever, so that they don't pay per round, how is that calculated in this payment? Because they could, I mean, arguably play an infinite number of rounds, assuming that.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't have the answer to that. That's a really good question. Let me talk to Mark about that. I assume it's in there somewhere, but I don't want to give a wrong answer. If not, we'll definitely readdress that because you're
Because I mean,
as far as I know, this is Angela. As far as I know, that the annual passes are excluded from the revenue round calculation that comes to the city.
Okay, well, that's a little problematic though, isn't it? In some ways. I mean, it's good for the authority, but it's not necessarily great for the city because we're losing out on those dollars. And the other point was, I'm glad that the authority is doing really well, whereas they would typically be into their line of credit at this point. They have the amount of the line of credit times 2 in the black. I'm just wondering, I realize that there is no interest on the loan that the city is paying, so it's kind of hard to argue that or suggest that the authority pay perhaps some of that surplus to toward that debt, because that's number one, not the arrangement. Number two, it's not economically advantageous to the authority because they basically have a free money. But has there been any talk about the city sort of reworked the deal in bad times? Has there been any talk between the city, and this is a question for you, Angela, as well as for Mike, about taking some of the good stuff that's happening now and working that into a hybrid or a different or a temporarily new arrangement in terms of the repayment to the city?
I don't believe there's been any new discussions in terms of reopening what that agreement looks like. Angela, if you have had discussions that I'm not aware of, you can let me know, but I don't believe so. But to your earlier point, I think we definitely should look into what those season passes do. So I'll run that back. I'll actually bring it up tomorrow in the meeting. But in terms of renegotiating whatever the payback plan, I'm not aware of that. And that was with the finance committee?
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that I mean, obviously there's no incentive to do it, right? Because the Oak Hills Authority has free money, no interest, right? But I'm saying that that was reworked a number of times when the authority was having a difficult time. Mm-hmm. My sense of fairness, at least, would dictate that when the times are good, that maybe some accommodation be looked at least about reworking at least temporarily that arrangement to take advantage of some of this sort of windfall. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Right. Or not even reworking the arrangement, but in a goodwill gesture, paying more back toward the city, given your current cash flow situation. I think that's really the issue, not necessarily
I
working.
think there's some lessons that we have to go back and taking a look at that. If you recall that part of the problem that the golf course got into, the golf authority got into, was because they were saddled with the debt that they had.
Right.
And, you know, in good times, it's great. Everybody's got enough money and everybody can pay it off. But then, you know, then we have a bad stretch of weather like we did 2 years ago. And, you know, then everybody's saying, forcing us to make accommodations and borrowing money that they don't have. So I'd be very, very careful to say, oh yeah, this trend that we have over the last year and a half is great, you know, and enter into another agreement with the city that's going to cost us in the long run. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, part of the viability of the golf course is to continue to maintain the property that we have and improve it. You know, it's got a great reputation in the area today. It would be difficult to, it would be tough to, it would be a shame to jeopardize that reputation because the maintenance of the property has gone downhill. So
I don't think anyone's suggesting that. I think people are just suggesting if the authority feels that they are in a position to consider it, we would ask that you consider a goodwill earlier repayment, not mandating it, not demanding it, simply suggesting it based on your financial outlook for consideration.
But that's my point precisely, is that I would say to you, Mark, and the rest of the group, that be very, very careful about looking into the future and saying, well, and I think you're on the right track by not saying that this trend that's going up is going to continue. You're lowering your revenue expectations for next year already. That's great, being conservative. And I think that, you know, you're at the mercy of what the weather's going to be. We don't know what's going to happen. You know, you're going to get more and more storms with, I'm not going to get into climate change, but yeah, we're going to get more storms that dump 6 inches of rain on the city. So I'd be just very, very careful about any magnanimous gestures that you feel you want to make.
And I think both points are well taken. I think for me personally, I'd want a little bit more data and as to where this trend is going. Was this a one-time blip? I mean, we have our projections. We feel pretty confident in our projections, but they're projections, right? So if we come back and, you know, looking back historically, when I came on the authority, year after year, we were coming into the season with a balance on that line of credit. That was how the authority paid its bills over the winter. So one of the things, like the newer members of the committee, this is not the way to run anything, because if not, we're going to come back in 5 years. So I think we need a little bit longer of a data set to understand. And if that needs to be adjusted, I think, you know, definitely we want to work with you guys. There's no doubt about that. I just don't want to be in the situation where, you know, it's like your own family, your house, right? If you have money, it's not necessarily like, okay, you know, go spend it. We're even with the cart pass, anything that we're trying to make investments in, it is with the goal of, if we have money now, we can spend it if it's something that's going to be revenue generating down the road, like the golf simulators, like a continuous golf path that will pay for itself, those type of things. So definitely point well taken. I understand, you know, both sides, but I kind of err towards the latter, where I wouldn't want to overextend. I also don't think, we're not a for-profit business, so it's not like we should be coming with $1 million in our pocket either, right? It should be going back to either, you know, with adjusting rates or in making investments into the park beyond just golf. You know, I think there's other things that we can make investments in. I think that's one of the things that might have been overlooked a little bit to some extent when their cash wasn't good, was the remainder of the park, which is beautiful. I think, you know, there should be some consideration there as well.
I think what was also overlooked, or not overlooked, but it wasn't even considered, was the notion of having seasonal memberships such that our original understanding about $2 per round is inherently impacted by those seasonal passes, because suddenly there are rounds that we're not recovering any money for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have the ability to track how many times those folks play too. So I'll have to talk with Mark how that works. If it's a flat piece of what that annual pass would be, do we go and dig into the analytics and say, hey, Ed played 110 times, but Bill played 10 times? I don't know how granular we can be, but I agree. We should look at.
Yeah, and that could very well go into deciding how much to charge for those passes, because if you have to, if it turns out that they're playing 100 rounds that we're not getting, that the city's not getting any money for, then but we ought to, because that wasn't in the plan when we entered into the agreement in the first place. We might very well, there's an argument to be made that we should get $2 for each of those rounds, and that might impact how much you would have to charge for those.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
what would be the problem with charging those people $2 per round?
In addition to what you mean as they play
Yeah.
for every round I mean, I guess it would be the argument of they're paying that upfront charge. They don't want to be dinged every
Well,
time.
it's one or the other. I guess that's what you have to look at, because if Mark has worked it into the numbers of the cost of the pass, then maybe it's there. And obviously he's probably including that in, he's including that in what we're paying to the city. But if not, then just charge them $2 every time they come through. When they're coming through, they got to come by, they got to make a reservation. You charge them $2. I don't see that that's a big deal.
I mean, you don't want to call it a city tax because the city's not authorized to charge it to a tax, but it's
Then they'd be limited. Then they'd be limited to what they could deduct on their income tax.
But Mike, you were on the right point, right? Which is we need the analytics to understand, are they charged, are they not? If they're not, what are the average number of rounds played by unlimited players per year? If you assumed a $2 payback to the city on the average number of rounds, is that built into the cost of the unlimited pass today? Or do you need to factor that in going into next year at the new rate of the unlimited pass?
Right.
The idea of a surcharge or a additional fee per round, as an unlimited pass holder myself, I'll tell you, that would infuriate me every time I showed up at the course.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean,
yeah,
maybe
that would piss me off too. But yeah,
maybe it's as simple as taking the annual pass, dividing it by what the round would cost you,
Exactly.
multiplying it by 2.
Exactly. And just figuring out in your current cost structure, is that covered? Or do we have to raise or adjust the annual pass cost? Because on average, the annual pass player plays 50 rounds, so that's $100. It's got to go to the city inside the cost of the unlimited pass. Is that work or does
And to my other point about, in good times, making some accommodation, this could be one of those things, so that, for instance, you don't need to increase, maybe you decided not to increase the pass, the cost of the pass, but they are paying, playing each person on average X number of rounds. Then those rounds, those $2 per round will come out of, the $400,000 that you guys have at the moment, because it should be being paid to the city, but for this special arrangement that was not considered when the agreement was entered into.
Yeah.
This, Troy, I agree with what Ed said entirely. You can't charge people $2. That has to be all figured out and built in. And if somebody played 1,000 rounds, you're gonna have to make it up next year and your pricing in scheme. This is only the second year you guys have done it, so I know there's a learning curve there. Yeah, and I think you only have how many people are unlimited? Do you have, what's the number of 65?
75, I believe. Is that what he said?
That 75 was the cap. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it was last year. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's at least, let's say each of those people plays 20 rounds for this, just a very conservative, well, let's say 10 rounds, a very conservative number. That's 70, that's 75.
That's 1,500 rounds.
Yeah, 1,500 rounds. Yeah. So that's like times, $2. So that's, it's something.
Yeah, no, and the bottom line is it's what we should be doing. So, let me talk with Mark. I don't know. I agree. When we go and visit whatever we do with those passes and the rates and all those things, I'll make sure that that's involved, and then I'll see what kind of analytics he has. So that, and I'll report back to you so we can make sure that it's the right amount, whether it's an average round per, whether it's dividing that number by what you would have made, those type of things. We'll figure that out. But
Yeah.
next time I come in front of you guys, I'll have an answer to that.
Yeah, I don't want to, I'm not trying to like nickel and dime you guys because, or punish you guys for doing as well as you have been doing, which that should be applauded. But the city, we're responsible for the city side of things, and the city presumably would like to get their money sooner rather than later. And if there's something that can be done to do that, or if we're not getting all the dollars that we're due because of these arrangements that were not considered at the outset of the restructuring of the debt, then maybe we should address those.
Completely agreed.
One last question, Mike. What about the tennis? Looks like tennis is edging up a little bit. Is that something that you got some thoughts about or plans for? Or?
That's just the contractual number. That's a hard number. And when we renegotiate, when they re-upped their contract last year, because we had explored some other different options there, that's the hard contract. So we know what that tennis money is set in stone.
Is there any opportunity? Do you think that that's an opportunity to grow a little bit?
We explored it, and we had some other folks wanting to come in and do some things. I think some of the ideas that came in, I don't think the community would like, especially the neighbors. So I would say that number, I don't know that we want to do too much. The tennis is very self-sufficient. It's constant income that we get, very little labor. I know Jim, the superintendent, does some work over there contractually, but it's not, I don't know that we want to make a big change there for a little bit more money, to be honest.
No, I mean, not to get rid of the tennis, but I mean, develop the tennis a little bit more perhaps contract with the city for youth tennis, something along those lines.
Yeah, so Denise Brown heads up our tennis committee. She'll be reporting tomorrow. I'll run it by her. I'm just not as heavily involved, so I don't want to speak to it, but she very well might be doing some more kind of grassroots type stuff with the city. So let me touch base with her.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it just as another cost or profit center, perhaps.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other
Nice
questions?
job.
Thank you, Mike, for the presentation and for fielding those questions that I'm sure you weren't expecting. I'm not sure that I was expecting to ask some of the questions I did. So thank you for that. And I look forward to continuing this discussion.
All right, sounds good. Appreciate it, everybody. Have a great night.
Good luck,
luck.
Mike.
All right.
Thank you.
I don't really see anything of else on the agenda unless Angela, you'd like to fill us in on some other informational stuff.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is sure.
Yeah.
One quick thing with, I think it'd be remiss if we didn't mention that we got a AAA rating renewed again this year. I saw that in the paper.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Angela and Henry and the team, and I'm happy about that myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, that's true. I heard that as well. Angela, is there anything that we need to know about in addition to that or beyond that from the financial reports that we have attached to our agendas?
I guess what I'd like to add is for the bond rating agencies, I put together a forecast of where I think the year end will come in, and we will not need that $8 million fund balance transfer. You'll actually come in, expected to come in at a $1.2 million surplus of revenues over expenditures. A lot of that was related to, we conservatively budgeted 97.6 collection rate, but the collection rate came in at over 98%. And also, the trend of New Yorkers moving to this area, it added to a $4 million surplus in the permit revenue. So we were very lucky this year to come in to have such positive surprises on the revenue side.
That's great. So we had a
Was-
$4 million surprise on the revenue side, and we're not going to need the 8 million, but we're only going to have 1.2 million in surplus? Or was that 4 million for this past fiscal year?
The 4 million is only for property tax, real estate conveyance tax, right?
Right, but that goes into our budget, right? That goes into our bottom, that falls into our bottom line. So,
Right, but I mean.
but that
I
was
think
for
what-
last, I guess.
But what
it-
Angela's saying is that I'm looking on page 55 of the revenues. You look at that, there's some really very exciting numbers in there that we're doing very well.
And that's but I guess my question is, you're projecting a $1.2 million surplus next year. The $4 million over and above what we had budgeted for, obviously, is for last fiscal year, correct? It's a question I'm asking of Angela.
Yes, correct. Those are the numbers for the 2021 budget. So we are expecting, because of these surprises on the revenue side, that there were some under budget areas on the expenditure side. And the combination of those two resulted in a $1.2 million surplus net. But we were expecting an $8 million drawdown. So
Right.
that means it's essentially, we came in $9 million positive.
Right.
Do you have a sense of, or do you know what the budget, what the rainy day fund looks like now, what that number is?
The rainy
guess
day
that-
fund, if you look at the comprehensive annual financial report, there was an accounting change. So if you look at that metric, it looks like that our rainy day fund fell because the accounting change, the new auditors informed us that we have to move the $8 million budgeted fund balance transfer to restricted. And the rainy day fund is the unrestricted. So the total fund balance didn't change, but because of accounting rules, it looked like our fund balance fell by $8 million. We don't need that $8 million. So we are at 17.6% of expenditures, which is a very healthy fund balance. Our policy for the city is 7.5% on the low side and 15% on the high side. So at 17.6, we still have, and that is a big impetus for the AAA bond rating. And that's what we presented to the bond rating agencies.
Great. Very good. Is there any other question?
Yeah, I just had a clarification, Angela, I noticed on the transfers we just walked through earlier today, the contingency account balance after the approved transfers was $1.3 million. And I thought I saw, and I can't find it right now in my papers, I think it was on page 54, we have the contingency balance. It looks like it's only about 65,000 there.
Right, that was the balance for the prior year.
Oh, okay.
So in the previous meeting, we were still drawing down from the 2021 budget, and then we moved to the new fiscal year.
Okay, got it.
All right.
Thank you.
No other questions? Thank you for that, Angela, for that presentation. Are there any other questions?
I just want to apologize to everyone because I was on the road all day today, and for some reason, my hotspot wasn't working good today. So, Ed, is there anything that I may have missed or that you were not able to comprehend from me because I was having problems?
No,
in terms of voting?
we took care of the two transfer items. I'm not sure if you voted on the second one. I know that you voted on the first one. Were you around for the
Yes.
second transfer item?
Yes.
Okay, so if Donna didn't report that earlier, she can report that vote as in the affirmative. And thereby both items passed unanimously. And that's pretty much it. Everything else was, I think, informational. So there being no other questions, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Before you leave, Ed, were we
Yeah.
supposed to were we all getting a copy of this?
I got my copy.
I have Ed Abrams' copy.
I have
I
Sherry's.
have my copy.
I have Sherry's copy.
Okay.
So it turns out they're all